the relationship between our two countries has always been characterized by very strong trade, by also very strong trust. For the Italian companies, of course, the Chinese market is important. A, because of its size. B, because of its complexity, because it's a mature market, and also because it has a worldwide expansion. At the same time, of course, we are very keen, as the Ministry for Made in Italy, to protect the intellectual property and to protect from what is one of the greatest negative impacts that we have in Italy, that comes from falsification of the Made in Italy brand. We're creating a series of agreements with Alibaba. We're working together because it's important also not just for the consumer to know that what they acquire on this platform is original, it's valid, it's perfect, but also for the platform themselves, because your credibility is built on the quality of the products you give. So I think there's a mutual interest.
And China is not only a market for Italy anymore, and many Italian companies have outsourced portions of their manufacturing to China, actually. The fashion industry especially is heavily reliant on global supply chain. And do you think that global geopolitics, the tensions are affecting the supply chains of Made in Italy?
Well, I think that we're going through uncharted territory as far as global trade is concerned. Made in Italy is not where things are made, but it's how things are made. The substantial part of the product, be it the creativity, be certain manufacturing processes, have to be made in that part. 60% of that has to be Italian, 40% can come from all over the world. But that's what everybody's doing. As you know, Italy was in the part of the Silk Road, came out of the Silk Road and signed a new agreement. Right at the same time, we signed a new agreement. What's the meaning of that? The Silk Road belonged to that skewed kind of situation. It was done by the government who did that for ideological reason, whatever, wrong reason. We said exactly to the Chinese where we want to go together. There are two ways we can go. Either we go towards a trade war, or we, as I said, we rewire our relations and we're able to find a new element. And I think what I hope is the relations between Italy and China is exactly that.
You mentioned Italy's withdrawal from the Belt and Road Initiative in 2023, 4 years after the country's joining. Do you think it was because Italy was not benefiting from the initiative?
It was because the decision was not taken on the basis of an evaluation of Italian interests, but rather had domestic ideological positions that were taken at the time.
So you think it was all about ideology, more about ideology than trade?
The decision about joining, yeah, they didn't take into consideration trade, but was rather sort of a provocation and the idea we're going to go out. Thirdly, because we are embedded into the European Union. We're part of this wide market that we want to preserve. We're very much happy to be on your market, but we don't appreciate lots of cheap Chinese, not regulated product coming to ours. We set the rules, and I think that if we respect the rules, the Chinese are perfectly able to be very competitive.
And it's very much of a balancing act for Italy, isn't it? And you said Italy is embedded in the European Union, so it has to balance its national interests and also the interests of the European Union, and also its relations with China.
It's exactly like that. You put it right. It's a balancing act. We are a trading nation. 1/3, roughly, of our GDP comes from exports. Yeah. You understand that Italy can only survive and thrive in an open market. We're part of the European Union. We're part of the values of the European Union. We also share the European Union's not just trade policies, but more different policies. At the same time, of course, within the European Union, we defend our interest, and rather than defend, we pursue our interest. Italy can help in finding, like you said, the right balance or the harmonious relationship that the world needs.
The harmonious relationship or the common ground between the two countries. And sustainability is a major pillar of Italy's economic strategy and is where Italy and China can possibly find common ground. Do you see any potential cooperation between these two countries in this field?
I think there are lots of opportunities for cooperation together because of your, for example, EVs is one of the sectors because of your technological advance, the use of green technology. The green transition in China is very strong, but let me say it also just as clearly to my Chinese friends, I think there's ground for cooperation as long as the cooperation is perceived as balanced, mutually beneficial, and in the end, and that I would like to stress, beneficial for the whole world.
You said that it should be beneficial for the whole world when it comes to green transition. Italy was one of the countries that voted for imposing additional tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. How do you think that could impact Italy's green transition efforts?
We were part of those because we felt at one point, and I'll have to be straightforward again, that part of the production was subsidized and it's part of leveling the playing field. All over the world, there's a certain level of tariffs that help create the necessary balance.
Does Italy subsidize this EV sector?
No, unfortunately we don't.
Not at all.
We don't, and within the European Union system is the European Union, the Commission that acts for all the member states in terms of foreign trade policy.
So none of the EU countries subsidize their EV sectors?
Not to the extent of others. I mean, there might be subsidies, of course. It would be hypocritical to say there's no state aid. It's the level sometimes is too high. Or even without even without the state aid, sometimes there's such an imbalance that you have to produce, you have to protect your products. Let's say agriculture, to just move to another totally different sector. In agriculture, you see most of the time that there are tariffs that are applied in order to produce your domestic producer. But everything has to be reasonable.
And what is complicating the situation? Global geopolitics right now is Trump's return to the White House, and he has threatened sweeping tariffs on the US traditional allies, including the European Union, Italy. And how do you think that would impact Italy's economy?
If we start with protectionism, if we start along that path, we start to erect walls, and then we shrink whatever it's inside. We're in a global world where whatever happens in one part of the world affects the rest of the world. Tariffs exist, as I said, always existed, smaller, bigger. There are kind of adjustment mechanisms that we have in the world economy in many sectors. If they become too much for too long, they can stifle complete development. But if they're raised high for a certain amount of time and then brought down to reasonable levels again, we might be hopeful that it's just a temporary adjustment we go through. It has to be temporary, hopefully an adjustment, hopefully we find ways to prevent the other perspective, which run the risk of being negative for everybody. If something doesn't work, we have to tell each other straight in the face without acrimonious attitudes, but rather we agree to disagree and to find a solution to our disagreement.
Do you think it could be a reminder for both the EU and China? Now it's time to sit down and talk.
I think now it's time to sit down and talk.